Hey everybody, it's Joe with J Blake Photo. Welcome to another video on my channel. Today we're going to be talking about some news that just came out regarding Canon releasing a new eye-controlled autofocus system for mirrorless cameras. So let's take a look. Okay, so a couple of websites, including CanonNews.com, have been reporting some patent details coming out from Canon regarding a new camera or a new technology to go in their cameras that would allow you to control the autofocus system with your eyeball. This gets a little confusing because when we say eye-AF or eye-based AF, normally we're talking about eyeball autofocus, something that you found in the Sony cameras recently, where the subject's eyeball, even if the subject is an animal, is actually tracked by the camera. Now, advances in modern autofocus systems, smaller and smaller autofocus points, faster and faster processing systems have allowed us to do things like track the eyeball of a subject, so that you can get tack-on focus on your subject and not have to worry about whether or not the eye, which is normally where you want to start your focusing, is going to be in focus. So this is a different kind of eye-AF. This is eyeball-controlled AF, and the eyeball in question is that of the photographer. So the person behind the camera is the one who would be controlling the autofocus system with their eye. Now, this is not new technology. So even though we do have a patent application from Canon for a new version of this tech, this is not something that is new. Canon has actually had this in their cameras for a very long time. And actually they had this in their cameras between 1992 and about the mid-2000s. They were releasing cameras that had this technology. Now they were all film cameras, analog film cameras. This tech never actually made it to the digital era when we were using, contrast and phase detect AF, either on a CMOS sensor or now directly on the camera sensor itself. And this technology came in a couple of different flavors. There were versions of it where you would just have a small number of autofocus points. For example, some of the early versions of the cameras that had this tech in it, when you would look through the viewfinder, when you would look through the diopter, you would only see maybe 3 autofocus points. So you might have one here, and one over here. So really, as you moved your eyeball, it would only really need to look at where or on which side of the eyepiece you were looking. So if you were looking in the middle, it would give you that middle focus point. If you were looking to the left, it would give you the left. It would give you the right if you look to the right. So not super complicated, and from what I understand, it was relatively effective. However, as the cameras increased in complexity and towards the latter end of this tech, you actually had higher end cameras from Canon shooting film that had 45 autofocus points, which kind of sounds weird considering the fact that we still have cameras that are coming out with less than that from Canon. But you had 45 autofocus points where they were all kind of bunched in the middle. So kind of like how the 60 Mark II is now. And as you would kind of look at them, they would be rather on, but not always. So if you were one of the folks who maybe had the type of eye or the type of face where it fit correctly, you felt comfortable with it, you liked using it, and it was successful for you, then you were probably about 90%. But for the rest of the market, about 50% of people, it was about hit and miss. Some people loved it, some people didn't. Way back in 2001, I was working at an electronics store. We were selling cameras. We had cameras with this technology. And I saw a lot of returns from customers that did not like this technology. It just didn't work as well as they wanted, and they were looking for something a little bit more consistent. So that's where things were in 2004, and then for the last 15 years, we've had contrast AF and phase detect AF built into our cameras. Now we have, tracking, we have eye tracking, we have subject identification, background splitting. There's so much stuff going on the processors of these cameras that really, I think the autofocus systems are doing a pretty phenomenal job. I find myself normally moving the autofocus points on my camera when I'm doing stills for preference more than anything. The tracking does a pretty decent job. I'm not really sure what would be better tracking using my eyeball or tracking using sophisticated artificial intelligence and algorithms in the camera to track the subject that I'm actually trying to look at. I would really rather my camera identify that subject and then stick on it. But I do understand why they would want to, potentially incorporate this technology. If you're switching subjects, I don't know, maybe it'll do a cool kind of rack focus. Maybe you can kind of rack focus really quickly back and forth between multiple subjects with this technology. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that in the patent, it specifically mentions using a small kind of diopter mirror to split out the light coming into the viewfinder, which makes sense because you're going to need to be able to both see what's coming out of the camera, whether it's an electronic viewfinder or an optical viewfinder, and you're also going to need the camera to be able to see your eyeball. So it needs to create a split there, which is just kind of funny because it means that we have to put a mirror back in a mirrorless camera to make this technology work. There's also going to be light emitting diodes or LEDs that would have to illuminate your eye so that it can see it, right? So this might be something akin to the iPhone's Face ID, Face Unlock technology, where it's going to blast you with infrared light, but you're not going to see it. It's not going to actually interrupt or distract you. So now the infrared light that's bounced off of your eyeball then goes back through the beam splitter or the pentaprism or the reflector, whatever they've got in there to kind of send it off to another sensor. That sensor then detects the position of your eyeball, and then using complex algorithms mixed probably with some tracking technology on the sensor in the processor, it's going to try and figure out where you're trying to look and then focus there. That's pretty much all we know thus far, is that it's going to be using infrared technology to illuminate the eyeball, and then an off viewfinder CCD or CMOS sensor to be able to capture the eyeball. So basically it's just taking pictures of your eyeball. This might just be a patent that, that goes nowhere, but Canon has used this technology relatively successfully in the past. And I wouldn't put it past them to put it in as an additional feature in future cameras. So just super interesting on the focus side of things. Again, I would just prefer better tech to track my subject. But I do understand that, if you've got your face up to the camera and you don't want to be pushing on the screen or on a joystick to be able to modify your focus points, you just want to be able to do it with your eyeball. But imagine that you have, 500, 1,000, 5,000 autofocus points in your camera and you're selecting them with your eye. I could see just being slightly off or slightly missing. Or what happens if you look to part of the EVF that actually has the details of your image and then it switches focus all the way to the bottom? I could see issues there. So I'm kind of curious as to how this is going to work, how they would implement it, and what the success rate would be, but super interesting. I'm curious, what do you guys think about the idea of eye focus? Would you just prefer better algorithms in the camera to track the subjects that you're tracking? Or do you think that this kind of tech would be helpful to help you modify your autofocus point selection in a camera? And how do you feel about having infrared beams shot at your eyeball all the time while you're looking in your viewfinder? All right, thanks for watching this video. Just a quick recap on some info coming out from Canon, some news related to patents. If you like videos like this, go ahead and hit the like button. If you're interested in news about camera stuff, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.